The laughter hit Hassan before the spilled juice did. It ran down his uniform, sticky and red, while the marble floor of the academy reflected 100 sneering faces. Jabari stood at the center of it all, expensive watch flashing under the chandelier, as he kicked over Hassan's mop bucket for the second time. Zola filmed. Kofi clapped. Someone shouted for the old beggar to kneel and clean faster. Hassan bent down slowly, his weathered hands shaking not from age, but from restraint. Then something slipped from Jabari's blazer and skidded across the polished floor. A black USB. Tiny. Silent. Dangerous. Hassan's eyes locked on it. And in that instant, while the rich children laughed at the poor janitor, fate quietly began to laugh at them. What would you have done in Hassan's place? Walk away in silence or pick up the one secret that could destroy them all? Tell me in the comments. And where are you watching from today? Which country and what time is it there right now? If you love powerful emotional stories with shocking twists, subscribe and stay with us for the journey ahead. By sunrise, the laughter from the marble hall had traveled farther than Hassan ever wanted it to. Students replayed the video over breakfast in the academy cafe in dorm rooms in the backs of chauffeured cars. Some laughed openly. Some laughed because everyone else did. A few looked uncomfortable but said nothing. In places built on status, silence often dressed itself as innocence. Hassan arrived before dawn anyway. He always did. The grand gates of Mirembe International Academy were still half-shadowed when he pushed his old cleaning cart across the courtyard. The school stood on a hill above the city, like a kingdom of glass and stone, with its shining windows, trimmed gardens, imported fountains, and banners promising excellence, leadership, legacy. Parents sent their children there to become ministers, CEOs, ambassadors, heirs. But Hassan had learned a long time ago that buildings could be beautiful, while the hearts inside them rotted quietly. He unlocked the side entrance with his staff key and stepped into the silent corridor. The floor smelled of detergent and yesterday's perfume. He moved with practiced care, sweeping, wiping, polishing. To everyone else, he was part of the furniture, a shadow with a mop, a bent back in a faded uniform. That was why he saw everything. He saw which teachers drank secretly from flasks in parked cars before assembly. He saw which students slipped money into others' lockers to buy loyalty. He saw who cried in bathroom stalls. He saw which parents smiled for charity photos and cursed drivers 2 minutes later. He saw who greeted security guards by name and who treated them like walls. And now, in the inner pocket of his work jacket, he carried something that hummed with danger. The USB. He had not slept much. After leaving the hall the previous evening, he had gone home to the small 2-room house he rented on the edge of the city near the market where generators coughed smoke into the night. He had sat beneath a weak bulb at the kitchen table, turning the USB over in his fingers, wondering whether touching it had already ruined him. Across from him, his granddaughter Amara had been asleep on the thin couch, one arm curled beneath her cheek, her breathing too light for a child her age. Every time she slept like that, fear sat beside him. Amara was 10, bright-eyed, soft-spoken, stubborn when it mattered. She loved drawing birds with impossible wings. She loved sour mango slices. She loved stories about brave girls who crossed rivers and came back with fire. But inside her chest was a heart that tired too quickly. The doctor had explained it in careful words Hassan could never forget: surgery, urgent, expensive, necessary. The money might as well have been the moon. So Hassan worked every shift the academy would give him. Early mornings, late evenings, weekend events, broken plumbing, emergency cleanups after parties thrown by the children who spent more on one pair of shoes than Hassan earned in months. He never complained in front of Amara. To her he smiled. To her he said, "We are still standing." To her he made tea sweeter than it should have been and pretended the light bill was not sitting unpaid beneath the sugar tin. But last night, after placing a blanket over her legs, he had plugged the USB into an old second-hand laptop he kept wrapped in cloth. The machine had groaned awake like something old and wounded. At first, nothing. Then folders. Dozens of them. Scans of transfer receipts, emails, budget summaries, meeting minutes, spreadsheet files with coded labels and edited totals. He had opened one file, then another, and slowly a pattern began to form. Money assigned to scholarship maintenance, money earmarked for student aid, money meant for equipment repairs and meals. Missing. Redirected. Disguised. Signed off in layers. At the top of several chains, one surname kept returning. Adewale. Jabari's father. Hassan had leaned back hard, the chair creaking beneath him. He knew that name. Everybody did. Mr. Adewale was a celebrated businessman, a donor, a smiling philanthropist with immaculate suits and speeches about Africa's future. His face was on banners. His money helped fund the Academy's science wing, and according to the files, some of that same money seemed to be feeding on the very students it claimed to save. Hassan had not understood every financial code, but he understood greed when it wore a clean tie. Now, hours later, he stood in a service closet beside the chemistry block and removed the USB again. He looked at it like a man holding a snake by the tail. "You picked a bad secret to drop, young master," he murmured. He slipped it back into his pocket when he heard footsteps. Tendai. The scholarship student moved through the corridor with the cautious posture of someone who had learned to make himself small in expensive places. He was 17, lean, sharp-eyed, carrying textbooks held together with worn elastic bands. He paused when he saw Hassan. "Morning, Sir," Tendai said. Hassan nodded. "You're early. So are you." Hassan gave a faint smile. "That is the burden of poor people. We arrive early to polish the world for those who wake late." A tired smile touched Tendai's face, then vanished. He glanced around the corridor before stepping closer. "I saw what happened yesterday," he said quietly. Hassan resumed wiping down the metal shelf, though his hand slowed. "The whole school did." Tendai swallowed. "It was wrong. Yes, I wanted to say something. But you did not." The boy's jaw tightened. Shame rose into his face. "Jabari's father sits on the scholarship review board. If they report me as difficult, I'm finished. My mother sold land for my transport here. My sisters—" He stopped. Hassan looked at him, then really looked at him. Fear, hunger, pride held together by exhaustion. He knew that face. He had worn versions of it in his own life. "Fear makes cowards of good people," Hassan said not unkindly. "But it also tells us what we still have to lose." Tendai stared at the floor. "Does that mean silence is acceptable?" "No," Hassan said. "It means silence has a price." The bell for first assembly rang in the distance. Tendai hesitated. "Sir, why do you keep working here?" The question landed deeper than the boy intended. Hassan turned away first. "Because my granddaughter needs medicine. Because rent is real. Because pride does not pay hospital bills." That was true, but it was not the whole truth. Tendai opened his mouth as if to ask more, then stopped himself. "I'm sorry about yesterday." Hassan gave a single nod. "Go to class." The boy left at a half-run. When the corridor emptied again, Hassan leaned both palms against the shelf and exhaled slowly. Children like Tendai were why men like him endured places like this. Not because the school was good, because somewhere inside its corruption were still a few lives worth protecting. The morning passed in fragments. 2 girls near the library giggled when Hassan walked by and whispered, "There goes the famous janitor." A young teacher avoided eye contact entirely. One groundskeeper clapped him on the shoulder with pity that felt heavier than mockery. At mid-morning, the Academy's accountant Nala approached him near the administrative wing. She was in her late 30s, always neat, always calm, with the kind of eyes that missed little and forgave less. Hassan had long suspected she was one of the few honest people in the building. "Can you help move some archived boxes after lunch?" she asked aloud, too casually. "Yes, madam," Hassan replied. Her gaze flicked once to his pocket, then back to his face. So, she had noticed something. Or perhaps she had noticed him noticing too much. After lunch, Hassan wheeled his cart to the records room in the older part of the building. Nala was already there, dismissing a clerk with a stack of folders. Once they were alone, she closed the door. Neither spoke immediately. Finally, Hassan reached into his jacket and placed the USB on the desk between them. Nala did not touch it. "Where did you get this?" she asked. It fell from a rich boy who thought humiliation was entertainment. Her expression changed only slightly, but enough. "Do you know what may be on it?" "Enough to know I should not open it alone again." That got her attention. "Again I looked last night." Nala inhaled through her nose. "That was reckless." "Yes, and brave." "No," Hassan said. Desperation often looks like bravery from a distance. For the first time, something like respect softened her face. She picked up the USB carefully. "If this is what I think it is," she said, "then someone has already been hurt trying to keep it hidden." Hassan went still. "What do you mean?" Nala looked toward the closed door before lowering her voice. "A security officer disappeared 3 weeks ago. Officially, he resigned. Unofficially, no one has seen him since the night he reported irregular access to the finance office." The air in the records room seemed to tighten. Hassan felt cold spread down his spine. Mini-truths had become something darker now, more dangerous, more deliberate. Nala met his eyes. "If this connects to the missing scholarship funds, then this is no longer about rude children and their cruelty. It is about people with power, the kind who do not panic when the poor suffer." Hassan thought of Amara asleep under a thin blanket, of hospital forms, of Jabari's shining watch, of Tendai's careful voice. "What do we do?" he asked. Nala looked at the USB in her palm, as if it were both evidence and lit fuse. "We do not run to the wrong door too quickly," she said. "We verify everything, quietly. And Hassan, until we know who is involved, trust no one who smiles too easily in this building." A cheer erupted outside from the sports field, bright and careless. Inside the room, Hassan felt something settle inside him, not peace, not yet, but shape. The children who had laughed at him yesterday thought they had stepped on a poor old man. They had no idea they had knocked loose a wall. And behind that wall, the rot was deeper than any of them knew. By evening, the academy no longer looked like a school. It looked like a kingdom preparing for worship. Strings of warm lights draped from the jacaranda trees. White tents glowed over the garden lawn. Waiters in pressed uniforms moved between tables covered in gold cloth and crystal centerpieces. Imported flowers sat in silver bowls. A live band tuned its instruments near the fountain. Luxury cars rolled through the front gate, one after another, each one gleaming under the lamps like it had never known dust. It was Zola's 18th birthday. At Mirembe International Academy, even private celebrations were performances. Status had to be seen. Wealth had to be heard. And tonight the rich had come dressed like royalty to applaud themselves. Hassan stood near the catering entrance in his faded work uniform, one hand on the handle of his cleaning cart, watching staff rush past with trays of grilled fish, bright fruit towers, and sparkling drinks. He should have been home by then, checking Amara's temperature, making sure she took her medicine after supper. Instead, he had been ordered to stay late. Special event support, the supervisor had said, not meeting his eyes. "Do your work and avoid attention." Avoid attention. Hassan almost laughed at that. Since the humiliation in the hall, attention had followed him like smoke. Students stared. Some whispered. Some smirked. A few even greeted him with mock bows. The video had spread farther than the academy now. He had heard 2 kitchen boys talking about it in the service corridor that morning. One had laughed. The other had gone silent when Hassan walked in. Humiliation traveled fast when the victim was poor, but danger traveled quieter. That afternoon, while pretending to reorganize storage in the records wing, Hassan had met Nala again. She had not smiled. She rarely did. Instead, she had shown him printed fragments from the USB transfer logs, edited budget trails, meeting approvals with suspicious timestamps, enough to confirm that money meant for scholarship students had been siphoned away through shell vendors and inflated maintenance contracts. Enough to confirm that this was real. Not enough yet to expose safely. "Tonight, keep your head down," she had warned. "When wealthy people celebrate, they become careless. Listen more than you speak." So Hassan listened. He listened as guests praised the imported decorations. He listened as parents compared new contracts, new land deals, new charity headlines. He listened as students laughed too loudly, intoxicated by privilege, long before any alcohol touched their lips. He listened as the Academy's string quartet shifted into a popular love song to please the younger crowd. And through it all, he listened for fear. Because guilty people always carried a different kind of silence. At the center of the lawn stood Zola, radiant and perfectly composed in a deep emerald gown that shimmered when she moved. Her hair was sculpted carefully. Diamonds caught the light at her ears. Around her gathered the usual orbit of admiration girls complimenting her dress boys, angling for her attention, photographers capturing every angle of her smile. Jabari stood close by in a tailored black suit, confident as ever, one hand in his pocket, laughter easy on his lips. Kofi hovered on the other side, restless and sharp-eyed, already behaving like the night belonged to him too. To anyone watching from a distance, they looked untouchable. But Hassan had seen cracks in untouchable people before. The first sign came just after sunset. A young waiter carrying a tray of drinks brushed past Jabari and nearly stumbled. A glass tipped splashing juice across the polished stone path. Jabari's face hardened instantly. "Watch it," he snapped. The waiter, barely older than the students, apologized at once. "Sorry, sir. You didn't see Kofi," cut in with a mocking grin. "Maybe the staff are blind now." Zola laughed lightly, though it sounded more automatic than amused. Hassan had been mopping near the fountain. He saw Jabari glance at him, and in that glance was recognition, not of a man, but of a target. "There he is," Jabari said. "Perfect timing." Hassan kept his expression flat. Jabari crooked a finger as though summoning a servant in a palace. "Old man, come clean this mess. Since that's the one thing you're good at." Nearby students turned. Some smiled before anything had even happened, eager the way crowds are when cruelty promises entertainment. Hassan rolled the cart over without haste. "Step aside," he said quietly. But Jabari did not move. Instead, he picked up a napkin from a table, let it fall deliberately at Hassan's feet, and said, "No, no. Use your hands, that's what the camera likes." A few people laughed. Kofi clapped once, delighted. "Yes, give us another performance." Zola lifted her phone. Whether from instinct or pressure, Hassan could not tell. The old ache returned behind his ribs. Not surprise, not even shame anymore. Something colder. Something that had learned how often the powerful needed an audience for their sins. He bent to gather the broken shards from a fallen glass near the spill. As he did, Kofi tipped a bowl of party confetti over Hassan's cart. Metallic strips scattered across the cleaning supplies and wet floor like mock celebration. The crowd burst into louder laughter. "Now sing," Kofi shouted. "Sing happy birthday while you clean." A student from the back added, "Make him dance first." Another voice, "Come on, old man, earn your wages." Hassan's hand tightened around the cloth until the knuckles whitened. He kept his head down. Not out of surrender, out of control. He had learned long ago that rage, when spent too early, only fed the people who wanted it. Jabari crouched slightly, lowering his face closer. "What's wrong, Hassan? Too proud tonight?" The use of his name startled several students. Most had never bothered to learn it. Hassan looked up at him then. For one strange second, the noise around them thinned. Jabari's expression still held arrogance, but Hassan saw something else underneath it, something restless. A flicker, a tension behind the eyes. Not guilt, fear. Small, hidden, but there. Interesting. Before Hassan could answer, a voice cut through the circle. That's enough. It was Tendai. He had arrived in a clean but modest dark blazer, probably borrowed for the event. He stood at the edge of the crowd with his jaw tight and shoulders squared in a bravery that clearly terrified him. The laughter dipped. Jabari straightened slowly. Excuse me, Tendai swallowed. You've made your joke. Leave him alone. Several students looked between them, instantly alive with the thrill of possible conflict. Kofi barked a laugh. The scholarship boy found his voice. Jabari's smile returned thinner now. Careful, Tendai. Tonight isn't the night to forget your place. The words hung in the air like a slap. Tendai's face burned, but he didn't step back. My place is not under your shoe. Hassan felt both pride and dread at once, because truth spoken without power often paid first in blood. Jabari moved closer, lowering his voice so only those nearby could hear. One complaint to the board and your fee review disappears next term. You know who signs those papers, don't you? Tendai went still. There it was. Not just cruelty. Leverage. A few students shifted uncomfortably. Most did nothing. Privilege loved morality until morality became expensive. Tendai's fists clenched. For one heartbeat, Hassan thought the boy might still speak, might finally choose the dangerous side of dignity. But then Tendai looked away. The silence that followed was heavier than laughter. Jabari smirked, victorious. That's what I thought. Kofi raised his drink. To knowing where you belong. The circle loosened. Music swelled again. Tension dissolved into chatter, the way wealthy gatherings always swallowed ugliness if the wine was good enough. Hassan resumed cleaning. Tendai stepped back into the crowd, face rigid with humiliation, not only for Hassan now, but for himself. And Zola, she said nothing. But when the others turned away, Hassan noticed she had lowered her phone. Later, much later after the cake had been cut and sparklers had burned down to smoke, Hassan was sent to clear rubbish behind the catering tent. The noise of the party reached him only in pieces there, bass from the band bursts of laughter, the clink of glasses. He worked quickly. He needed to leave. Amara should have been asleep by then, but her breathing had been unstable the night before. He hated being away when the air turned cold. As he lifted a stack of disposable trays, he heard quiet footsteps behind him. Zola. Without the center stage smile, she looked younger, more uncertain. The emerald gown still made her look untouchable, but her eyes did not. For what happened earlier, she began, then stopped. Hassan waited. She folded her arms not from pride this time, but discomfort. Kofi and Jabari go too far sometimes. Sometimes, Hassan asked. The word landed harder than he intended. She flinched. I didn't pour anything on you, she said softly, almost defensively. No, Hassan replied. You only watched. The night air seemed to tighten. Zola looked away toward the lights. You don't understand how things work here. Hassan almost smiled. Child, I understand exactly how things work here. That is the problem. She said nothing. Then from Hassan's shirt pocket, his old phone began to vibrate. The ringtone was weak, distorted. He snatched it out at once. It was the clinic. His heart dropped. Yes, he answered, already turning away. The nurse on the other end spoke quickly. Amara had felt chest pain again that afternoon. The neighbor who watched her had brought her in for observation. She was stable for now, but the doctor wanted to review her medication and discuss timing. There was strain in the nurse's voice, the kind that polite people used when trying not to say hurry. Hassan closed his eyes briefly. I'm coming. When he ended the call, he forgot Zola was still there. He pressed one hand to his forehead. For a second, the old man disappeared, and all that remained was a grandfather cornered by time. "Is it your wife?" Zola asked quietly. Hassan let out a breath that almost broke. "My granddaughter." Her face shifted. "Amara," he said, before he meant to. "She has a heart condition." Zola stared at him, and for the first time since he had known her, Hassan saw no mockery at all, only discomfort. Then something worse. Conscience. "She's sick?" Zola asked. "Yes, and you're still here working." Hassan looked toward the blazing lawn, where cake towers still glittered beneath chandeliers brought in just for one night. "Do you think medicine discounts itself because the poor are tired?" The words were not loud. They did not need to be. Zola's throat moved. She looked past him at the garbage bags, the stained towels, the stacked trays from a party that probably cost more than a year of surgery. For a moment, Hassan thought she might say she was sorry. Instead, voices approached from the lawn. Jabari and Kofi loud and laughing again. Instantly, Zola's posture changed. The softness vanished behind the mask she wore so well. "Forget this conversation," she said quickly. Then she turned and walked back toward the lights before either boy could see her standing beside the janitor. Hassan watched her go, understanding something important. She was not innocent, but she was no longer entirely asleep either. And sometimes that was where collapse began, not with confession, but with discomfort. He loaded the final rubbish bag onto the cart and headed toward the staff exit. As he passed the service corridor, he caught a fragment of conversation drifting from around the corner. Kofi's voice. Low. Urgent. "Did you make sure he doesn't have it?" Jabari answered too quickly to sound calm. "He's a janitor, not a detective. And if he found the drive..." There was a pause. Then Jabari said, colder now, "Then we deal with him before he talks." Hassan did not stop walking, but every muscle in his body turned to iron. The party music behind him swelled with applause. Ahead of him, the dark parking lot waited. And somewhere between glitter and darkness, Hassan understood the truth in full. The humiliation was never just sport. It was cover. The next morning, the academy looked as polished as ever. Sunlight spilled across the glass front of Mirembe International Academy. Sprinklers whispered over the lawns. Drivers unloaded students in crisp uniforms. Teachers crossed the courtyard holding tablets and coffee. From a distance, nothing about the place suggested rot. It looked disciplined, prestigious, safe. That was how corruption survived best. Not in darkness, in clean light. Hassan entered through the staff gate with the same old cart, the same faded uniform, the same lowered gaze people expected from him. But inside, everything had sharpened. He had barely slept after the birthday party. Jabari's words kept repeating in his head. Then we deal with him before he talks. Not if something was wrong. Not if Hassan had misunderstood. The boy had spoken like someone already standing inside a crime. As he crossed the service corridor, the younger cleaners nodded to him. One offered a sympathetic smile. Another quickly looked away, embarrassed by pity. Hassan said nothing. His silence was not weakness that morning. It was storage. He was gathering himself, every thought, every instinct, into a single direction. The records wing. Nala had sent him a brief message at dawn through one of the kitchen staff she trusted. Come after first bell. Alone. So Hassan waited through the morning routine. He swept classrooms after assembly. He wiped fingerprints from the brass railings outside the administrative block. He emptied bins outside the principal's office while two board members passed by discussing a donor luncheon. One of them laughed about developing the next generation of ethical leaders. Hassan kept his head down so they would not see the bitterness in his face. Ethical leaders. The scholarship students skipped meals to stretch their allowances. Some borrowed textbooks because approved funds had been delayed. The science lab had broken equipment nobody replaced. Dormitory bathrooms had leaked for months. Yet the donor wing always had fresh paint. The gala banners were always new, the speeches were always polished, and now Hassan knew why. At 9:20 he pushed his cart into the old records room. Nala was already there, the blinds tilted nearly shut. A laptop sat open on the desk beside stacks of printed pages. She did not waste time. "I copied the drive," she said quietly. "Then I removed any sign it was accessed here." Hassan closed the door behind him. "What did you find?" Nala turned the screen toward him. Columns of figures filled the display. Transfers, vendor codes, budget revisions, approval stamps. At first glance, she said it looks like normal financial movement. But someone built false layers into it. Maintenance contracts, catering adjustments, technology upgrades, emergency campus repair, scholarship administration costs. Tiny distortions. Spread out. Professional. Hassan leaned closer. How much Nala gave him a look. Enough to change lives. Enough to ruin them, too. She tapped the keyboard and opened another file email correspondence. Many addresses had been partially scrubbed, but not perfectly. "There," she said. A chain of messages appeared. Not full names in every line, but enough fragments to identify patterns. One alias matched a vendor registered to a company linked to Jabari's father. Another connected to a board consultant. A third showed approvals from an internal office Hassan had never expected to see. He went still. "The principal?" he asked. Nala's face hardened. He may not have started it, but he signed things. Repeatedly. Hassan stared at the screen without blinking. "So the school itself is inside it." "The school is wearing it," Nala said, "like perfume." Her bitterness surprised him. She must have been carrying suspicion for a long time. She opened a folder labeled "Only with Numbers." Inside were scanned scholarship lists. Students approved. Students, delayed students, rejected for budget limitations. Several names had red notations beside them. On another sheet were internal transfers marked for discretionary executive allocation. Hassan recognized one name. Tendai. He murmured. Nala nodded. His scholarship was reduced twice in the past year. Not because funds were low, because funds were moved. Hassan's jaw tightened. So boys like Jabari mocked boys like Tendai, not only from privilege, but from stolen bread. Their families had not merely benefited from inequality. They had fed on it. Nala clicked open a final file. This one was different. Security logs, entry times, access cards, restricted office doors. One section highlighted late-night movement near the finance office over a period of 3 weeks. Hassan frowned. "What am I looking at?" "Anomalies," Nala said. "Repeated access after hours. One card belonged to a senior facilities officer, another to temporary security override clearance. Who used them?" "That is the interesting part." She pointed. "The facilities officer reported his card missing for 2 days last month, then found it again. No formal investigation." Hassan read the name twice. He did not recognize it. Nala scrolled farther down. "Now this," she said. A log from 3 weeks earlier showed a block of entries around midnight followed by a system interruption and manual reset. Beside it sat the name of a security guard Hassan knew by sight. Musa, a quiet man. Broad shoulders, soft-spoken. The one who used to share roasted ground nuts with the gardeners near the south gate. "I haven't seen him in weeks," Hassan said. "You were not supposed to ask." Nala replied. "Official story says he resigned and returned to his village." And unofficially, Nala met his eyes. Unofficially, his locker was cleared out before dawn. His phone stopped working the same day. His sister came here asking questions. They told her nothing. The room seemed to shrink. Hassan remembered Musa once warning a kitchen worker not to leave her bag unattended around the administrative corridor. Too many invisible hands in this building, he had joked then. Perhaps it had not been a joke. Nala lowered her voice even more. "I think Musa copied part of these files. I think he planned to take them out, and I think something happened before he could." Hassan felt a chill under his skin. "Then how did the USB reach Jabari?" That Nala said is the question. He paced once across the room, then back again. His mind moved through possibilities. Musa had copied evidence. Someone discovered it. The drive changed hands. Maybe Jabari had taken it from his father's office. Maybe he had no idea what was truly on it. Or maybe he knew enough to panic. What if he was carrying it to destroy it? Hassan asked. Nala did not answer immediately. Instead, she opened a photo file. The image was grainy, likely pulled from a phone or hallway camera. It showed part of the underground parking entrance at night. 2 men stood near a pillar. One was Musa. The other was turned only halfway, face partly obscured, but the watch on his wrist gleamed sharply. A large metal watch with a square-edged face. Hassan had seen it many times. On Jabari. He felt his pulse stumble. That boy, he said. He was involved before this. Nala nodded once. Or used. Or both. Hassan stared at the image until his eyes hurt. The whole structure of what he had believed shifted. At first, the story had looked simple, cruel, rich children mocking a poor janitor. Ugly but ordinary in its own way. Then the USB had revealed theft. Then the party had revealed fear. Now this. Now the line between childish arrogance and adult corruption had vanished completely. Jabari was not only a bully, he was inside the machinery. A knock sounded suddenly at the records room door. Both of them froze. Nala shut the laptop halfway. Hassan moved the USB printouts under a folder in one swift motion. Another knock. Hassan, a female voice called from outside. "Are you in there? We need the archive ladder." It was only a clerk. Nala answered at once, calm and irritated. "1 minute. Inventory review." The footsteps lingered, then faded away. Hassan exhaled slowly through his nose. "We are running out of safe corners," he said. "Yes," Nala replied. "Which means from now on, 1 mistake will be enough." She pulled a slim folder from her bag and handed it to him. Inside were photocopies, just a few pages carefully selected. Enough to prove patterns existed. Not enough to expose everything if seized. "Hide these somewhere no one would search first," she said. Hassan frowned. "My house gnome. Too obvious. Somewhere people consider beneath them." He almost smiled at the irony. "That gives me many options." For the first time that morning, Nala's mouth nearly softened. "Almost." Then her face closed again. "There is more," she said. He looked up. "I checked employee incident records tied to finance access. 3 names raised flags over the past 2 years. 1 transferred, 1 resigned, 1 vanished Musa." She paused. All 3 had submitted maintenance or security notes connected to the same corridor outside the finance office. Hassan understood before she finished. Anyone who noticed too much was removed. "Yes." Silence settled between them. Beyond the blinds, the school continued with its routines. Bells rang. Shoes tapped along polished tiles. Somewhere outside, students shouted during PE. The academy was functioning perfectly while its bones were being gnawed from the inside. Hassan closed the folder and slipped it beneath the lining of his cart's lower compartment. "I need to know one thing," he said. "Can we trust the police?" Nala gave a tired, humorless laugh. "Which police, the honest ones or the sponsored ones?" He said nothing. "That is why we cannot move too early." She continued, "If the wrong person is tipped off, the files vanish, the blame falls downward, and people like you become convenient criminals." "People like me," Hassan repeated. "The poor," she said flatly. "The visible nobodies. The ones society already believes are capable of stealing because survival made them desperate." The truth of it settled heavily between them. Hassan had lived long enough to know how neatly the world arranged guilt. If the scandal broke today, they would not first question donors, chairmen, principals, or board members. They would question the janitor with hospital debt and a sick granddaughter. He would be the perfect story. A poor man. A missing fund. A stolen drive. Everything would fit too easily. His chest tightened at the thought of Amara hearing his name ruined in public, at Tendai losing his place, at Nala being dismissed as a bitter accountant, at Musa perhaps dead, perhaps hiding, perhaps broken, becoming just another erased worker in a polished institution. Nala closed the laptop at last. From this moment, she said, you must assume someone is already suspicious. Of me, of whoever has the missing drive. Hassan nodded. Then they will watch staff first, and students who know too much second. He thought of Tendai, of Zola's shaken face, of Kofi's agitation, of Jabari's threat in the shadows behind the party. Then another thought arrived, sharp and unwelcome. What if Musa tried to tell someone before he disappeared, Hassan asked. Someone young, someone connected. Nala looked at him. You're thinking of Jabari. I'm thinking of the fact that boys do not carry dangerous evidence in their jacket pockets by accident. That sentence sat in the room like a lit match. Nala rose and gathered the printed sheets into separate piles. Go, she said. Too much stillness becomes suspicious. We meet again only if necessary. Hassan moved to the door, then stopped. Nala. She looked up. If something happens to me, it won't, she cut in. But if it does... Her gaze held his. He finished anyway. The child comes first. Amara. For a brief moment, the steel in her expression gave way to something human and aching. I know. He left the records room with the cart rolling quietly before him. Students passed him in the corridor without seeing him. A teacher complained into her phone about donor seating plans. 2 boys argued about football scores. Somewhere a girl laughed bright and careless. The world kept moving. Yet now Hassan knew the shape of the darkness beneath it. Not rumor, not suspicion, a system. A stolen scholarship fund, a compromised principal, a missing guard, a frightened rich boy, and a trail of evidence dangerous enough to make a janitor worth silencing. As he turned toward the finance wing, he saw a man in a dark suit speaking with the principal near the stairwell. The principal's smile was too wide. The suited man's face was unfamiliar, but his eyes were not. They were the cold, scanning eyes of someone measuring threats. The man looked directly at Hassan, and held the look for 1 second too long. Hassan kept walking, but every instinct inside him came awake at once. The files had not just revealed the truth, they had revealed that the truth was already looking back. The trap was waiting for Hassan before he even understood it had been set. It began with a scream from the finance wing. Not the scream of pain, the sharper kind. The kind that belonged to polished offices and vanished money. Within minutes, the administrative corridor erupted. Staff hurried in and out of the finance office. 2 clerks whispered with pale faces. A secretary covered her mouth dramatically and said, No, this cannot be happening. Students drifting between classes slowed down, hungry for scandal, the way children of privilege always were. The rumor spread in under 5 minutes. Cash was missing. Not petty cash, not lunch money. A large emergency allocation money, supposedly set aside for scholarship disbursements and urgent campus repairs, had disappeared from a secured finance drawer, and linked transfer files were corrupted. By the time Hassan arrived with his cart at the far end of the hall, the principal was already there, barking instructions in a voice sharpened for performance. No one enters or leaves this corridor without permission, he said. His face carried outrage, but Hassan saw something uglier beneath it. Readiness. Too fast, too controlled, as though he had rehearsed this expression. Nala stood near the office door with a file pressed to her chest, silent, unreadable. Their eyes met for less than a second. It was enough. Something was wrong in a way even she had not expected. Then Hassan noticed who else had arrived. Jabari, Kofi, Zola. The 3 of them stood among a cluster of upper-level students pretending concern. Jabari's brows were drawn in an almost theatrical frown. Kofi kept glancing around, too much like a boy watching a fire he had started spread farther than intended. Zola looked pale. The principal turned and saw Hassan. For one heartbeat, the corridor went strangely quiet. Hassan, the principal said, voice dropping into cold accusation. "Where have you been this morning?" The question hit too hard, too directly. Hassan kept his grip on the cart steady. Working. Science block. Then records corridor. Then here. Can anyone confirm that a ripple ran through the watching crowd? Hassan understood instantly. They were moving too quickly toward him. That meant only one thing: the story had already been chosen. Before he could answer, one of the finance clerks stepped forward, agitated. "Sir, the cleaner's trolley was seen near this office earlier." Hassan turned to her. "Near this office I clean this corridor every day, but not inside restricted areas." She snapped. "I did not enter your office, sir." The principal's jaw tightened. "Search his cart." The command landed like a stone dropped in water. Shock widened through the crowd, followed by excitement. Students edged closer. Phones began to rise, discreet and eager. Hassan felt a sudden vicious calm. This is it, he thought. Two security officers moved toward the cart. One of them he knew. The other was new, a broad man with impersonal eyes and gloves already on. Hassan noticed that detail at once. Gloves. Prepared. They opened the lower compartment. Mops. Cleaning fluid. Old cloths. Spare liners. Then the new guard reached into the back panel farther than necessary and pulled out a sealed envelope. Nala inhaled sharply. The guard opened it and revealed bundles of cash. A staged amount, thick enough to shock, neat enough to photograph. The corridor exploded. Oh my God. So it was him. I knew it. Students whispered, with the ugly thrill of seeing poverty confirmed as criminal. A few teachers looked away in immediate discomfort, as if shame could be escaped by refusing to witness it directly. Jabari did not smile. That frightened Hassan more than if he had, because Jabari looked relieved, like a man who had been holding his breath for days. "I've never seen that money before," Hassan said. The principal's face hardened into moral disgust. "You expect us to believe someone planted it in your cart?" "Yes," Hassan replied. A few people laughed. That bitter, superior laughter of those who confuse wealth with logic. Kofi folded his arms and muttered loudly enough for others to hear. Poor people always say that when they're caught. Zola flinched. Hassan looked straight at the principal. "You are moving too fast." The principal stepped closer. "And you are in no position to judge process." "No, Hassan." That voice still controlled. "But I am old enough to recognize a performance." The insult stung. The principal's nostrils flared. "Take him to the security office," he ordered. "Now!" The guard seized Hassan's arms. At that exact moment, a shrill voice came racing down the corridor. "Tendai, wait!" It was one of the kitchen staff, breathless, searching the crowd. Behind her stood Tendai, alarmed by the commotion. She spotted Hassan and blurted out what she had clearly been trying to say privately. "Your neighbor has been calling the staff line. It's Amara. She's collapsed again." The hallway tilted. For a second, Hassan could not hear the rest. Just one sentence pounding in his skull. "Amara has collapsed." He twisted toward her. "What hospital?" "The clinic first, but they're transferring." The security grip tightened. "I need to go," Hassan said. And now, for the first time, the calm cracked. "My granddaughter." The principal cut him off. "Convenient." Hassan stared at him with naked disbelief. Convenient? A child fighting for breath, and this man called it convenient. Something fierce rose in Hassan's chest, then stronger than fear, sharper than humiliation. Not for himself, for Amara, for every poor soul reduced to suspicion the moment they begged for mercy. "I am not begging for your respect," Hassan said, voice low and trembling with contained rage. "I am telling you a child may die if you delay me." The principal didn't blink. "If the child exists in the condition you claim, someone else can attend to her. You stay." The cruelty of it silenced even the students. For a beat, nobody moved. Then Tendai stepped forward. "Sir," he said, visibly shaking. "Please. Let him go. I'll stay. I'll give a statement. I saw him in the science block earlier." The principal did not look at him. "This does not concern you. It does if you're accusing an innocent man." Gasps. A few phones tilted higher. Kofi hissed under his breath, "Stupid idiot!" Jabari's face darkened. "Tendai, stop." But the boy was already beyond retreat. He pointed at Hassan's cart. That envelope was planted. He wouldn't hide money in his own cleaning supplies. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense for a thief who thinks no one notices him. The principal snapped. Tendai's courage faltered, but not fully. "Or for someone who thinks poor people are easy to blame." That landed. Hard. Not because it was dramatic, because it was true. The principal took one threatening step toward him. "Be careful, young man." Tendai swallowed but held his ground. Across the hall, Zola looked as if she might speak. Her lips parted. Then she glanced at Jabari and froze again. Hassan saw it. Saw the war inside her. Conscience against cowardice. The oldest battle in corrupt places. At last, Nala moved. "Principal," she said evenly. "Before any formal accusation is made, procedure requires a documented audit of chain of access to the office drawer and corridor footage. If you bypass that, the board can later claim mishandling." The principal turned on her. "Are you questioning my authority? I'm protecting the institution," Nala said, "unless the institution prefers spectacle over process." Several staff members shifted uncomfortably. She had said what none of them dared. The principal's eyes narrowed. He hated being challenged in public, especially by someone calm enough to make him look emotional. "Fine," he said. "Review the footage." A murmur swept the crowd. One of the admin clerks hurried to bring the security feed onto a monitor inside the office. Because now there was an audience, the principal had no choice but to act like rules mattered. They crowded around the doorway. Hassan remained gripped by the guards, every second burning because Amara was somewhere between fear and pain, and he was trapped in a corridor of polished predators. The screen flickered. Footage from earlier that morning loaded. The finance corridor. Empty at first. Then staff passing. A delivery cart. A teacher. A student aide. Hassan himself moving past with his trolley at 8:12 a.m. exactly where he said he had been. He did not stop. Did not enter the office. The principal's mouth hardened. Fast forward. The footage jumped. At 8:26 a.m. static briefly streaked across the image. Then a partial blackout. Just 6 seconds. When the picture returned, the corridor looked normal again. Too normal. Nala stepped closer to the screen. Pause. She pointed. Hassan's cart now parked 2 meters closer to the finance office than before. Without him near it. A murmur rose again. "That's impossible," Tendai whispered. No, Hassan thought. Not impossible. Edited. The principal seized the moment. There. Enough. But Nala didn't move back. No. Zoom the frame before the static, then after. The clerk obeyed nervously. The before image showed the cart's side bucket half full. The after image showed it nearly empty. A change too subtle for most people to catch. Too precise to be accidental. "The footage has been tampered with," Nala said. Silence. The principal went cold. "You are making a serious allegation." "I am stating what is visible," Nala replied. "And if footage is corrupted, then so is any accusation built on it." The new security guard stepped back almost imperceptibly. Hassan noticed. So did Zola. Their eyes met for the smallest instant, and Hassan saw recognition flash across her face. She knew something about that guard, or about the type of men her father hired when delicate messes needed cleaning. Then the blow came from another direction. One of the kitchen staff hurried in with Hassan's old phone in her hand. "It kept ringing in his cart," she said. I answered. Her face had gone pale. "They've transferred Amara to the cardiac unit." The corridor lost its shape around Hassan. He closed his eyes just once. Not here, he pleaded silently. Not like this. When he opened them again, Jabari was staring at him not with mockery now, but something far more unsettling. Conflict. The boy had wanted Hassan crushed, but not perhaps with a dying child bleeding into the edges of the scene. That was the first crack. The second came when Zola suddenly spoke, voice trembling. Kofi had access to a security card last night. Every head turned. Kofi's face drained of color. What Zola's hands were shaking now, but she kept going. I saw him. Near the admin block. He said he was looking for Jabari, but he had his father's entry pass. Zola, Jabari said sharply. She ignored him. Or tried to. The principal thundered. This is neither the time nor place. No, Zola said louder than before. That's exactly why it is. The entire corridor seemed to stop breathing. Kofi stared at her in pure disbelief. Hassan, still held by both guards, felt the story shift beneath everyone's feet. Not enough yet to save him. Not enough yet to save Amara. But enough to fracture the lie, and once a lie cracked in public, it never sealed the same way again. The principal's straightened eyes blazing with the fury of a man losing control. This matter is now under formal internal review. Hassan is suspended immediately pending investigation. Suspended. Not arrested, not cleared. Exactly the kind of half-measure institutions used when they still wanted the poor man to suffer, but needed time to repair the script. The guards released him at last. Hassan did not thank anyone. He took his phone, his trembling hands betraying him for the first time all morning, and turned toward the exit. Behind him, voices erupted, students arguing, staff whispering, Kofi denying everything, Zola refusing to back down, the principal trying to contain the damage. But Hassan heard only one thing. Amara. As he reached the end of the corridor, Tendai caught up to him. Sir Hassan stopped. The boy's face was pale but resolute. I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner. Hassan looked at him for a long second, seeing not weakness now, but painful awakening. Then do not stay silent next time, he said. Tendai nodded once. Hassan walked out of the academy into the punishing midday sun with disgrace at his back and terror in his chest. Behind him, the rich still believed they could manage the story. Ahead of him, a child was fighting for life, and somewhere inside the crumbling machinery of the academy, the people who had framed him were beginning to understand something dangerous. The poor janitor had not fallen quietly. Hospitals had a way of stripping the world down to its true proportions. By the time Hassan reached the cardiac unit, the academy's marble floors, polished speeches, and expensive scandals already felt far away, like some cruel theater performed by people who had never watched a child struggle to breathe. Here there was no room for performance. Only machines. White sheets. Tired nurses. Quiet panic. Hassan moved through the corridor with the stiffness of a man holding himself together by force. The hospital smelled of antiseptic boiled air and sleeplessness. Relatives sat on plastic chairs with their hands locked together in prayer. Somewhere a baby cried. Somewhere else a man coughed deep and wet behind a curtain. The fluorescent lights made everyone look equally fragile. That Hassan thought bitterly was the only honest kind of equality most people ever saw. Amara lay in a narrow bed near the far end of the unit, her small chest rising too quickly beneath the blanket. A monitor glowed beside her. Tubes ran across her arm. Her face was pale in a way no child's face should be. For one terrible second, Hassan stopped breathing. Then he went to her. Amara. Her eyelids fluttered. She turned weakly at the sound of his voice. Grandpa, I'm here. He took her hand carefully, afraid of touching the tape near the IV. I'm here, little bird. She tried to smile. It barely formed. You came late. The words were soft, not accusing. That made them worse. Hassan bowed his head once, pressing her fingers between both of his hands. I know. A doctor approached a moment later, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and the firm patience of someone who had delivered too much bad news and still chose gentleness. Her name badge read, Dr. Achieng. You're her grandfather. Yes. She led him a few steps away from the bed and spoke in the practiced, quiet tone doctors used when trying not to frighten families further. The episode was serious, but she stabilized after medication, Dr. Achieng said. Her heart is under strain. We've discussed surgery before, yes? Hassan nodded slowly. She cannot keep having episodes like this. The doctor paused, then added carefully. We are reaching the point where delay becomes its own danger. Danger. As if he did not wake up beside that word every morning. I'm trying, Hassan said. Dr. Achieng studied him. Her voice softened. I believe you, but belief won't change the calendar. He looked through the glass partition at Amara again. She had turned her face toward the window now, as if watching a world she had not had enough time to enjoy. I will find the money, he said. Dr. Achieng did not offer false comfort. She simply nodded once. Then find it quickly. When she left, Hassan stood motionless for a long moment, feeling the crushing mathematics of poverty close around him again. Time, money, dignity. One always seemed to be purchased with the loss of another. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. Then instinct made him answer. Hassan came Nala's voice low and urgent. He turned away from Amara's bed, stepping into the corridor. Talk. The academy is boiling, she said. The principal is trying to contain everything as an unfortunate procedural misunderstanding. But Zola's statement changed the balance. Hassan leaned against the wall. Did she hold to it? Yes, under pressure too. Nala exhaled. Kofi denied everything, of course. Jabari said very little, which worries me more. It should. There was a brief silence. Then Nala said, Tendai came to find me. That surprised him. He said he wants to give a formal statement. Everything he overheard, everything he knows. Hassan closed his eyes once. The boy had crossed the line at last. Will he? I think so. He's terrified, which means he finally understands the cost. Before Hassan could answer, Nala added, There is more. Zola overheard her father on the phone this morning. She didn't catch every word, but she heard one sentence clearly. Hassan waited. Do not let the old man speak before we fix the footage. A slow, dangerous silence moved through Hassan's chest, so the adults were panicking now. Good. What does she want? He asked. She doesn't know what she wants, Nala said. Only that she can no longer pretend she knows nothing. That is how conscience begins. Or how fear changes shape, Nala replied. Listen carefully. We may have a narrow window. If Tendai speaks and Zola confirms the access card issue, we can force a broader review. But we need one more thing. Hassan already knew. Proof beyond accusation. Yes. He glanced at Amara through the glass. I cannot leave the hospital long. You may not have to, Nala said. I found an old facilities register linked to the finance corridor. Handwritten repair notes. One entry mentions a ceiling camera glitch reported by Musa, the missing guard the night before he vanished. Hassan straightened. What kind of glitch? The angle changed briefly, enough to expose a blind spot near the records transfer cabinet. She lowered her voice further. If Musa noticed that he may have hidden something physical before he disappeared. Hassan's mind sharpened instantly. Where I'm not sure yet. The note references a vent panel above the archive shelving in the disused maintenance room behind the finance wing. He let out a slow breath. People like Musa did not trust clean systems. They trusted hidden corners. Can you access it? Hassan asked. Not safely alone. Too visible. Too easy to blame me if I'm caught. And Tendai. He can get around more easily than staff after hours. So can Zola, depending on whether she's ready to stop hesitating. Hassan looked down the corridor of the hospital where families sat bent over grief and hope. Strange how battles were fought in both places at once. One in a school dressed as excellence, one in a ward dressed as survival, and between them stood the same question. Who would finally choose courage? When choosing it hurt, I'll talk to them, he said. You trust them? No, Hassan replied. Not yet, but I trust what guilt does to the soul if it has not fully died. After he ended the call, he returned to Amara's bedside. She was awake again, drawing weak shapes with one finger over the blanket. What are you making? Hassan asked softly. A bird, she whispered. He smiled, though it cost him. Does it know where it's going? It's looking, she said. That answer nearly broke him. He sat beside her until evening shadows stretched long across the ward. He told her a short story about a stubborn bird who flew through a storm because it had promised the sky it would not give up. She listened with heavy eyelids. Before sleep took her, she asked, Will you still be here when I wake up? Hassan hesitated. Then he told her the truth in the only form children could bear. I will always come back. When she slept, he stepped out into the hospital courtyard and called Tendai. The boy answered after 2 rings, sounding breathless. Sir, you left the academy? Yes, they let students go early. A pause. I'm sorry about your granddaughter. Sorry is a beginning, not a solution. I know. Hassan heard the shame, but also something steadier beneath it now. Do you still want to speak the truth? Hassan asked. Yes, even if it costs you the scholarship. Tendai did not answer at once. When he finally spoke, his voice shook, but not from indecision. My mother didn't raise me to eat stolen bread and call it opportunity. Hassan closed his eyes briefly. Good. The boy was becoming himself. There may be something hidden in the maintenance room behind the finance wing, Hassan said. Something Musa left. Tendai inhaled sharply. The missing guard. Yes. If I go there and they catch me. They may accuse you anyway one day if it protects someone richer, Hassan said. Understand this clearly. Silence does not buy safety. It only rents it. The line stayed quiet. Then Tendai said, I'll go. Not alone. Zola may help. This time the silence lengthened for a different reason. You trust her? Tendai asked. No. But I believe she is standing on the edge of the truth and is sick of pretending the view is beautiful. He gave the boy Zola's number, which Nala had sent through a secure message minutes earlier. If she refuses, then go anyway. Night deepened over the city. An hour later his phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown contact. This is Zola. Tendai told me. I can get us into the service corridor. Only once. After that, they'll know. Hassan stared at the screen. There it was. Not innocence. Not redemption. Choice. He typed back carefully. Then make it count. Check the vent panel above archive shelving. Touch nothing you don't need. Photograph everything first. Leave separately. 3 dots appeared. Vanished. Returned. Why are you helping us after what we did to you? Hassan looked through the glass at Amara, sleeping beneath hospital light. Then he replied, Because if I become like the people who ruined this place, my granddaughter survives in a world already lost. No answer came for a full minute. Then we're going in. The next 40 minutes aged him. He paced the courtyard. Sat. Stood again. Called Nala once. No answer. Called twice. Straight to voicemail. He imagined corridors, locked doors, cameras, footsteps, whispers. He imagined rich fathers making calls. Principals shredding files. Security guards moving where children should never have to hide. At last the phone rang. Tendai. Hassan answered immediately. Talk. The boy was breathing hard. He sounded half shocked, half terrified. We found it. Hassan went still. In the vent, Tendai said, "Wrapped in plastic behind the panel. A ledger book and a memory card." "Sir." His voice dropped. "There are names in it. Payment notes. Dates. And what?" Tendai swallowed audibly. "A list of students marked for scholarship cuts. Some names are crossed out. Some say, 'Replace with donor referral.'" Hassan shut his eyes. Human lives arranged like furniture. "There's more," Tendai whispered. Zola heard someone coming. "We almost got caught." "The new guard, the one from today, he was checking the corridor. He knows that room matters." So the circle was tightening fast. "Listen to me carefully," Hassan said. "Do not bring those items back to the academy. Photograph every page you can. Send copies to Nala from a secure number, not your own. Then hide the originals somewhere neither your room nor her office can be searched." Where Hassan's answer came at once. "The chapel donation box." Tendai went silent. "People hide lies in offices," Hassan said. "They rarely look for truth near God." A soft, stunned laugh escaped the boy despite everything. "Understood." Before the call ended, another voice came on the line. "Zola." For the first time, she did not sound polished. She sounded young, frightened, real. "My father is involved more deeply than I thought," she said. "I heard him say Hassan's name tonight. They were discussing how to isolate you before the next board meeting." "Then you know what you must decide," Hassan replied. Her voice trembled. "If I speak, my whole family falls. And if you do not," Hassan said, "other families keep falling in silence." She did not answer, but he heard her crying once quietly before the line disconnected. Hassan remained in the courtyard beneath a dim hospital lamp phone still in his hand. Inside the ward, Amara slept between danger and hope. Across the city, two young souls who had once watched cruelty in silence had stepped into the machinery of truth. And somewhere within the academy, powerful people were beginning to realize that the poor janitor they tried to bury had done something far worse than defend himself. He had awakened witnesses. The board meeting was supposed to be private. By noon, it had become something else entirely. A public spectacle. Parents had been called in under the excuse of urgent institutional concerns. Major donors arrived in dark suits and polished shoes. Senior teachers lined the back wall with tense faces. Administrative staff moved quickly, speaking in whispers, carrying folders like shields. Even several final-year students had found excuses to linger nearby, sensing that something larger than gossip was unfolding. At Mirembe International Academy, truth almost never walked through the front door. But scandal did. The meeting took place in the Grand Assembly Hall, a room built to impress. Tall windows threw sharp daylight across the polished wood floor. A carved emblem of the school motto hung behind the central stage. Integrity. Excellence. Legacy. Hassan saw it the moment he entered and nearly laughed. Integrity. He had come straight from the hospital, still wearing the same worn jacket, though he had washed his face and changed into his cleanest shirt. Exhaustion sat under his eyes like bruises. He had barely slept. Amara was stable for now, Dr. Achieng had said, but stable was the kind of word poor people learned never to trust completely. Beside him walked Nala, composed as always, carrying a slim leather folder and a tablet. Behind them, Tendai followed with visible tension, in every step, shoulders stiff, jaw set. He looked like a boy forcing himself to walk into a fire. At the far front of the hall sat the principal and several members of the board. Among them were wealthy parents, business figures, and two legal advisors. Jabari's father, Mr. Adewale, sat in the first row, elegant and unreadable, one leg crossed over the other. On his right sat Zola's father, broad-faced and stern fingers drumming faintly on the armrest. Kofi's father was there too, speaking quietly into his phone until the meeting was called to order. And then there was Jabari. He stood near the aisle with Kofi, both in formal school blazers. Zola stood slightly apart from them, pale and rigid, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had lost color. The room quieted when Hassan and the others entered. Not because they were welcomed, because many people still could not believe the janitor had returned. The principal rose first, offering the solemn expression of a man pretending to grieve a mess he had helped create. "We are here," he began, "to preserve the dignity of this institution during a moment of unfortunate confusion." "Confusion?" Nala said. The word cut through the hall so cleanly that several heads turned at once. The principal's face hardened. "Ms. Nala, you will have your turn." With respect, she replied, "Confusion is when figures do not add up once." This was years. A ripple passed through the parents. Mr. Adewale leaned back slowly, studying her now with open calculation. He was a handsome man, in the cold, expensive way magazines liked. Everything about him said control, public generosity, precision, charm sharpened into weaponry. But Hassan watched his eyes and saw irritation. That was good. Men like him only feared what they could not charm. The principal lifted a hand, forcing himself back into performance. "Before anyone makes dramatic allegations, let us remember the facts. A member of staff was found in suspicious proximity to missing funds. Tampered footage and contradictory student gossip have unfortunately complicated the matter. We will now conduct a formal internal review and—" No, Hassan said. The hall seemed to stiffen around the single syllable. He stepped forward into the open aisle. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "No more reviews behind locked doors," he said. "No more lies wrapped in procedure." A few parents exchanged glances. One board member muttered something to the legal advisor. The principal's eyes flashed. "You are dangerously close to contempt." Hassan looked directly at him. "And you are standing knee-deep in corruption while preaching order." A sharp intake of breath moved across the room. Jabari's head snapped toward Hassan. Kofi cursed under his breath. Mr. Adewale did not move at all, which made his stillness more dangerous than anger would have been. The principal straightened. "If you have evidence, present it. If not, this outburst ends now." Nala handed Hassan the folder. He opened it slowly, then placed several copied pages on the front table where the board could see them: financial transfers, vendor trails, scholarship cuts, approval stamps. "Scholarship money disappeared," Hassan said. "Maintenance funds disappeared. Access logs were manipulated. Security footage was altered. And every time someone noticed too much, they were removed." The legal advisor took one page, frowning. Another board member leaned in. Murmurs rose. Mr. Adewale spoke for the first time, voice smooth as lacquer. "These appear to be photocopies without verification. Anyone can manufacture paper." Hassan turned to him. "And anyone with power can dismiss truth before reading it." Mr. Adewale's smile was almost polite. "Be careful, old man." The threat was soft. That made it louder. Tendai flinched beside Hassan. Nala remained still. Then the principal saw an opening and seized it. "Exactly. This is why emotional accusations are dangerous. We cannot let a disgruntled employee already under investigation." "I'm not the one under investigation," Hassan said. "You were suspended because you needed me to be guilty before the truth reached daylight." The principal stepped forward, face red now. "Enough." And that was when Jabari made his mistake. He laughed. Not loudly, not the reckless laugh of the hallway, just one short, contemptuous sound, as if the whole thing had become tiresome. Hassan turned toward him. "You think this is beneath you," he said. Jabari folded his arms. "I think this is pathetic." "Do you?" Jabari's mouth tightened. "You wave papers around and expect the room to forget what you are." The insult landed exactly as he intended. Class, poverty, contamination. Several adults did not even seem shocked by it. They were too accustomed to cruelty when it arrived in polished language. Hassan took one step closer. "No," he said. "They are beginning to remember what you are." That drew a sharper reaction. Kofi muttered, "This old man has lost his mind." Tendai suddenly spoke, voice unsteady but clear. "No, he hasn't." Every eye turned. There he was, The scholarship boy. The quiet one. The one who was supposed to know fear better than truth. Tendai's throat bobbed, but he continued. I heard Jabari threaten him. More than once. I heard him say Hassan would be dealt with if he spoke. A shockwave moved through the student section at the back. Jabari took a step forward. You liar! Tendai's face blanched but held. You threatened me too. You said if I spoke up, my scholarship would disappear. That is absurd, Mr. Adewale said sharply, but his calm had cracked by a degree. Is it? Nala replied. She lifted her tablet and projected a document onto the screen at the front of the hall. Scholarship review entries. Names, adjustments, delays, notations. One of the mothers in the second row stood halfway from her chair. What am I looking at? Students marked for reduction while donor-linked allocations increased elsewhere, Nala said. This is not misunderstanding. This is design. The principal moved toward the technician. Turn that off. But before anyone could touch the controls, Zola stood. No dramatic music announced it. No sudden triumph lit her face. She simply rose because remaining seated had become impossible. Kofi used an access card to enter the admin corridor, she said. Kofi stared at her as if struck. What he said. Zola's voice shook, but she kept going. The night before the money was reported missing, I saw him. That is not true, Kofi snapped. You told me you were looking for Jabari. I was. You had your father's access pass. Now the room truly shifted. Kofi's father rose to his feet at once. Son Kofi's face had gone grey. Dad, Jabari cut in too fast. This is ridiculous. She's panicking. Zola turned toward him, and for the first time there was open disgust in her expression. No, she said. I'm done panicking for you. The silence that followed was so complete that Hassan could hear the faint electric hum of the projector. Then Zola delivered the blow that split the room open. Jabari knew Hassan was being framed. The words did not sound shouted. They sounded fatal. Kofi swore aloud. Mr. Adewale stood up so slowly it was terrifying. The principal began speaking at once, a flood of authority and outrage, trying to drown the moment before it rooted itself. This meeting is suspended. These children are emotional. We will reconvene privately with legal oversight. No, you won't, said a voice from the side entrance. Every head turned. The new security guard stood there, only not alone. Beside him were two uniformed investigators from the anti-corruption unit, and behind them another man in plain clothes. For one heartbeat, Hassan did not understand. Then he saw the handcuffs on the guard. Nala inhaled sharply beside him. The plainclothes investigator stepped forward, badge visible. We received an external data package this morning, containing financial records, photographs, and ledger entries tied to fraudulent scholarship diversions and falsified security access. The entire hall erupted, parents talking over one another, students gasping, board members shouting for order, phones lifted everywhere, now no longer hiding. The principal paled. This is highly inappropriate. This is an internal school matter. The investigator cut him off. Not when public funds and fraud are involved. Mr. Adewale's voice came low and furious. Who sent those files? No one answered. Hassan knew. Tendai and Zola had done exactly what he told them. The photographs, the copied ledger, the secure transfer to Nala. And beyond that, Nala had clearly made another move, one he had not asked about, because some acts of courage worked best unannounced. The investigator continued. Several names appear repeatedly, including members of this institution's leadership and associated vendors. The principal stepped back as though the floor had tilted. Jabari looked at his father, and in that instant Hassan saw it happen. Not repentance, recognition. The boy expected protection, expected the machinery that had always saved him to move again, expected his father to stand, speak, buy, threaten smooth control. Instead, Mr. Adewale said coldly, without even turning fully toward him, "You should have destroyed the drive when I told you to." The words dropped into the hall like a blade. Jabari froze. The whole room froze. Hassan felt the air change. There it was. Not rumor, not implication. A father exposing himself because his son had failed to be useful. Jabari's face emptied of color. What? Mr. Adewale realized too late what he had said. Fury flashed across his features, not at guilt, but at the mistake. And in that terrible second, Jabari learned the truth Hassan had suspected all along. He had never been a son first. He had been an instrument. The principal began shouting for everyone to leave. Kofi was denying everything to his father in a panicked rush. Zola stood trembling, tears running now, despite her efforts to stop them. Tendai looked like he might collapse, but he stayed upright. And Hassan Hussa stood in the center of the cracking hall, watching the false kingdom split down the middle. The motto behind the stage still read, Integrity, Excellence, Legacy. Now everyone in the room understood what it had really meant. Not values, camouflage. Once the hall broke, the lies broke with it. Not all at once, not cleanly, but enough. Voices crashed into one another beneath the academy's grand ceiling. Parents shouted over chairs scraping the floor. Students crowded the side aisles, no longer pretending they were just passing through. The anti-corruption officers moved quickly, separating board members, securing devices demanding names. The principal barked orders, nobody obeyed. Kofi's father grabbed his son by the arm so hard the boy winced. Zola stood motionless near the front row, tears on her face as though she had finally stepped out of a dream and found herself in a fire. And Jabari. Jabari did not move at all. He remained fixed in place, eyes locked on his father. You told me, he said, voice low and disbelieving. You told me it was only paperwork. Mr. Adewale did not answer. That silence did more damage than any confession. Hassan saw it happen in real time, the first true wound to Jabari's arrogance. Not public embarrassment, not scandal. Betrayal. The kind that arrived when a son discovered he had never been trusted with the truth, only used to carry its weight. One of the officers approached Mr. Adewale. Yeah. Sir, we'll need your phone and immediate cooperation. Mr. Adewale turned with icy restraint. Speak to my attorney. You may do that. The officer replied. After you surrender the device. Around them, the academy's carefully managed dignity collapsed inch by inch. The principal tried once more to regain control. No one is authorized to seize institutional records without Nala stepped forward and laid a second folder onto the front table. This should help, she said. The investigator opened it. Inside were copies of the handwritten ledger Tendai and Zola had retrieved from the maintenance vent, annotated with dates payment initials, scholarship cuts and cross-references to vendor contracts. Tucked inside was a small memory card, sealed in plastic. The investigator looked up sharply. Where did this come from? Nala met his gaze without flinching. From the place your missing security guard probably hoped someone honest would eventually find it. That name cut through the chaos. Musa. Even the staff at the back of the hall reacted. Some gasped. Others lowered their heads. The investigator exchanged a quick look with his partner. You're saying the missing guard collected independent records? I'm saying he noticed too much, Nala said. Like others before him. Hassan saw the officer's posture change. This was no longer just financial misconduct. Now there was a shadow of obstruction, possibly intimidation, possibly worse. The principal's face had gone from red to a strained grey. This is outrageous speculation. No, Hassan said, stepping forward. Speculation is what you used on me. The room quieted again, not fully, but enough. The investigator turned toward Hassan. Your name, Hassan. You were the staff member accused this morning. Yes. The officer studied him. And now you're standing here with evidence tied to long-term fraud. Hassan held the man's gaze, because the truth survived long enough to stop hiding. That answer seemed to land. The investigator nodded once, then gestured to a colleague to catalogue the materials. In the confusion, Jabari took 2 steps backward. Hassan noticed. So did Tendai. The boy wasn't trying to flee the building. Not yet. He was fleeing the moment. The raw humiliation of realizing the adults in his life had offered him wealth, status, protection, but never loyalty. Kofi, meanwhile, had already begun speaking too quickly, too defensively, trying to shape his own survival. "I only used the access card once," Kofi blurted to his father. "Jabari told me it was nothing. Just moving files. He said his dad needed—" "Shut up," Jabari snapped. Kofi stared at him in panic. "Why should I? You think I'm going down for you?" There it was. The friendship had lasted exactly as long as comfort did. The entire hall watched two rich boys begin devouring each other. But Hassan's attention shifted elsewhere to Zola. She was standing alone now, no longer beside her father, no longer beside Jabari or Kofi, no longer safely inside any tribe. For the first time, she looked like what she truly was beneath all the polished cruelty, a frightened young woman seeing the moral cost of silence in full daylight. When her eyes met Hassan's, she looked away first. Not from pride, from shame. And Hassan unexpectedly did not hate her for it, because shame, unlike mockery, could still become something useful. The investigators began escorting key adults into side rooms for questioning. Parents were told to remain available. Teachers whispered. Students sent frantic messages. Somewhere outside the hall, journalists had already begun gathering beyond the gates. Scandal had found the school's front door at last. Through all of it, Hassan felt a strange stillness growing inside him. He should have felt triumph. He did not, because even as the machinery cracked, Amara still lay in a hospital bed. Because Musa was still missing. Because Tendai had risked his future. Because truth did not erase suffering. It only gave suffering a name. An older board member, a woman Hassan recognized from scholarship ceremonies, approached him carefully. "Mr. Hassan," she said, visibly shaken. "I had no idea." He looked at her for a long moment. "That is the sentence corruption loves most." She flinched. He regretted nothing. By late afternoon, the assembly hall had emptied into smaller zones of damage. Interviews, statements, seizures, denials, lawyers arriving, donors making hurried phone calls to distance themselves. The Academy logo still gleamed above them, all ridiculous now in its perfection. At last, the lead investigator asked Hassan and Nala to remain in a private conference room for formal questioning. Inside, the air conditioning hummed too cold. A recorder sat on the table. Hassan answered steadily. The USB, the humiliation in the hall, the files, the planted cash, the altered footage, Musa's disappearance, the hidden ledger. Nala confirmed the financial inconsistencies with surgical precision. Tendai gave his statement too voice-shaking at first, then strengthening when facts began replacing fear. Zola was interviewed separately. When she emerged, she looked emptied out. Hassan stood in the corridor as she passed. She stopped clearly, unsure whether she had the right to speak to him. Finally, she did. "I heard what you told the investigator," she said quietly. "About me helping." Hassan waited. Her throat moved. "You could have said I only spoke when it was too late." "That would have been true," he said. Pain crossed her face. "But incomplete," he added. She looked up. "You still spoke." Tears gathered instantly in her eyes again. "I should have stopped them much earlier." "Yes." He did not soften the answer. That mattered. Zola folded into herself slightly, as if each honest word stripped away another layer she had once depended on. "When you said other families would keep falling if I stayed silent..." She pressed her lips together. "I couldn't stop hearing it." Hassan nodded once. "Good." The simplicity of that seemed to surprise her. She let out a shaky breath. "Do you hate me?" A crueler man might have enjoyed the question. Hassan did not. "No," he said, "but I am not interested in your comfort." That too was a kind of mercy. The useful kind. She lowered her eyes. "I understand." He was not sure she did yet, but perhaps one day. After she left, Tendai came to stand beside him in the corridor. The boy looked exhausted beyond his years. I thought telling the truth would feel bigger, Tendai admitted. Hassan gave a tired half-smile. It usually feels smaller, quieter, heavier. Tendai looked through the window toward the academy courtyard where investigators were now moving in and out of the administrative wing. Do you think it's over? No. Then what begins now? Hassan's gaze drifted far beyond the courtyard, beyond the gates, beyond the school itself. Consequences, he said. That evening, as the sun bled orange across the city skyline, the investigators allowed Hassan to leave. Nala insisted on accompanying him to the hospital. On the drive, neither spoke much. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of reckoning. At one red light, Nala finally said, "There is something you never told me." Hassan kept his eyes ahead. "A great many things," he replied. She almost smiled. "No, the central one." She turned toward him. "You were never just surviving in that school." He said nothing. "I checked one old public record after the interview," she continued. "Your full name flagged something I remembered from years ago. Hassan Okonkwo." He let out a slow breath. A name he had not heard spoken with that kind of recognition in a long time. Nala's voice softened. "You were the forensic auditor who exposed the Katala infrastructure scandal." The words carried history, weight, blood. Hassan watched the traffic light shift from red to green. "Yes," he said. Nala sat back in silence for several seconds. "They said you vanished." No, Hassan replied. "I was erased. There is a difference." And with that, the past rose inside the car like a second passenger. Years earlier, Hassan had been known in government and corporate circles. For one thing, he could follow money through lies. He had built a reputation as a forensic auditor, too stubborn to buy and too precise to intimidate. Ministers feared his reports. Executives hated his patience. He had once believed institutions could still be cleaned if enough brave people kept scrubbing. Then he uncovered a network of inflated contracts tied to a powerful conglomerate. He refused a bribe, refused a warning, refused a second warning. Soon after, his daughter Layla died in what officials called a road accident, a brake failure, a wet road, nothing to investigate. Only Hassan knew the timing was too precise, too convenient, too merciless. By the time the scandal reached the papers, his own name had been dragged through manufactured allegations, professional misconduct, missing documentation, questions about his methods. His career was destroyed not by proof, but by powerful men flooding the public with fog. All he had left was Layla's daughter, Amara. So he disappeared from respectable circles and took work where people stopped asking questions once they saw a broom in his hands. And when Mirembe International Academy's financial patterns began to smell wrong years later, Hassan recognized the scent instantly. He had not joined the school only because he was poor. He had stayed because he was hunting. Nala listened without interrupting until the hospital gates appeared ahead. At last, she said very quietly, "You carried all of that alone." Hassan looked out at the fading light. "No." She frowned. "I carried Amara," he said. "That is what kept the rest from crushing me." When they reached the ward, Amara was sleeping. Her small hand rested open on the blanket. Hassan stood by her bedside in silence, looking at the child, who had unknowingly anchored him through ruin, humiliation, and war. Nala stood near the door, watching him. Now she understood what everyone at the academy had failed to see. The old janitor was not merely a victim who had stumbled into evidence. He was a man who had once fought giants, been buried by them, and returned in humble clothing to protect children they considered expendable. Not for revenge, for rescue. Outside the hospital, the city moved through another ordinary night. Inside, Hassan sat beside Amara and took her hand again. The truth was out now, but truth alone would not save anyone, By morning, the academy was no longer in control of its own story. News vans lined the road outside the gates. Reporters stood beneath the school crest with microphones and sharpened voices speaking of corruption, missing scholarship funds, elite abuse, falsified records, and a widening investigation that now reached beyond the campus itself. Parents who once posed proudly in front of the academy sign arrived with hats pulled low and tempers high. Students huddled in clusters, refreshing their phones, watching their school turn into a national disgrace in real time. For years, wealth had protected the guilty. Now visibility was eating them alive. Inside the temporary investigation office, set up in the administration block, Hassan sat across from two officers while a ceiling fan turned lazily overhead. He had been there since early morning, answering follow-up questions, identifying signatures, clarifying timelines, and reviewing still images from the altered footage. Nala sat beside him with a stack of annotated copies, calm as always, though her eyes were rimmed with exhaustion. Tendai had already given a supplemental statement. Zola had done the same. Kofi, according to one of the officers, had begun correcting his memory at astonishing speed once legal exposure became real. Cowardice, Hassan thought often, discovered honesty only after protection failed. The lead investigator closed one file and looked up. The anti-corruption unit executed warrants this morning on 2 vendor offices tied to the maintenance contracts. We also recovered deleted messages from one of the seized phones. Nala leaned forward slightly. "Whose phone?" The officer glanced at the page. One belonged to the principal, another to Mr. Adewale's executive assistant. Hassan said nothing, but his pulse sharpened. The officer continued. "There are payment instructions, draft statements, and references to scholarship adjustments, coordinated with donor visibility targets, enough to support fraud, possibly conspiracy. We are also examining communication related to the missing guard Musa." At that name, a harder silence settled over the room. "Is he alive?" Hassan asked. The officer's expression changed by barely a degree, but Hassan caught it. "We don't know yet," he said. "Not good." Outside the office, voices rose in the hallway. Angry parents, lawyers, staff demanding clarification. The academy's polished order had collapsed into layers of damage control, and every layer smelled of panic. After the interview ended, Hassan stepped into the corridor just as a door slammed at the far end. Jabari. 2 officers were escorting him from another room, though not in handcuffs. Not yet. His blazer was gone. His shirt collar hung open. The arrogance that once fit him like tailored fabric now looked misaligned, as if it had been stitched onto the wrong body. But pride was still there. Pride was always last to die. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither man moved. Then Jabari said with strained bitterness, "Happy now, the question might have sounded absurd from anyone else. From him, it sounded wounded." Hassan took a few slow steps forward. "No." That answer seemed to throw the boy off balance. "You ruined everything," Jabari said. Hassan looked at him steadily. "No. I revealed what was already rotting." Jabari laughed once, but there was no confidence in it. "You think you're some hero because you sweep floors and carry papers," so Hassan said. "I think I am a man who got tired of watching children feed on stolen futures." The words hit harder than shouting would have. Jabari's jaw clenched. "You don't understand anything. Then explain it." For 1 second, Hassan thought the boy would retreat into the old mask sarcasm, contempt, mockery. Instead, something uglier cracked through. "He said it was normal," Jabari muttered. "My father. He said everyone moved money, everyone adjusted records, everyone bought influence. He said the world belonged to people strong enough to take their portion before someone else did." Hassan said nothing. Jabari's voice grew harsher, as if he hated himself for speaking and needed anger to continue. "You think I started this? I was 12 when he first took me to donor dinners and told me to smile at scholarship boys for the cameras. He taught me exactly what mattered. Appear generous. Stay above consequences. Never apologize downward." There it was. Not innocence, inheritance. A poison taught as sophistication. Hassan watched the boy closely. He had no desire to comfort him, but neither would he lie. Jabari had been shaped by corruption, yes. He had also chosen cruelty when kindness was available. Both things were true. "And when did you decide humiliation was entertainment?" Hassan asked quietly. Jabari flinched. One of the officers shifted, unsure whether to interrupt, but Hassan raised a hand slightly, and the man stayed back. Jabari looked away. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." The boy swallowed. "The first time I mocked someone, everyone laughed. His mouth twisted. Teachers didn't stop it. Friends admired it. My father called it confidence. After a while, it became easier to be the one who pointed than the one people pointed at." The confession sat between them like broken glass. Hassan nodded once. "So you became cruel to avoid becoming human." Jabari's head snapped back toward him. "Don't speak to me like you know me. I know enough." Before the exchange could continue, another voice cut across the corridor. "Jabari." "Mr." Adewale stood at the opposite end, surrounded by a legal counsel and 2 officers. Even now, in the middle of public collapse, he looked polished, controlled, dangerous. But today, the control had cracks in it. Jabari turned, something raw and desperate rising in his face. "Tell them," he said. "Tell them I didn't know all of it." Mr. Adewale's expression did not soften. "Speak only through counsel," he said. Jabari stared at him. "Not son. Not, 'Are you all right?' Not, 'I'm sorry.' Only strategy." The boy's face changed then slowly and terribly, not into remorse, into recognition. Final and complete. Hassan had seen it before in adults during fraud inquiries, the exact moment they understood they had mistaken utility for love. "You're leaving me with this?" Jabari asked, voice almost hollow. Mr. Adewale adjusted his cuff as though the conversation bored him. "Do not make this worse." A bitter strangled sound escaped Jabari's throat. "Worse." He took a step forward, officers tensing around him. "You used me." The hallway had gone silent. Staff, officers, lawyers, everyone heard it. Mr. Adewale's eyes hardened. "I prepared you." "No," Jabari said louder now. "You trained me to lie." That line seemed to land even on the lawyers. Mr. Adewale turned to walk away, and in that single act, he answered every question his son would ever have about what he meant to him. Jabari stood very still. Then he said not to his father now, but to the entire corridor. "I took the drive from his study. Every head turned. One officer stepped closer. Repeat that." Jabari's eyes remained fixed on the floor. "I found the USB in my father's study after he argued with one of his men about a missing guard. I knew it mattered. I took it because—" He gave a broken laugh. "Because I wanted leverage. Something to hold over him. Something that made me important." Hassan felt the truth settle into place. Not a mastermind. A spoiled son playing with a bomb he did not understand. "I kept it on me at school," Jabari continued. "I meant to copy it first. Then Hassan picked it up after—" His mouth tightened. He could not say after we humiliated him. "Not yet." The officer asked, "Did your father know you had it?" "Yes." "How he searched my room. Then he confronted me. He said I had endangered everything." Jabari swallowed. The next morning, Kofi helped move files. The footage was altered later. The planted cache. That was not my idea. He looked up at last, eyes bleak. That was theirs. The hallway erupted into motion again. Officers pulled one another aside. Notes were taken. A lawyer began objecting immediately. Mr. Adewale's face lost its final layer of polish. Hassan stood rooted where he was not in triumph, but in grim recognition. Here was the real shape of corruption, not only theft, but inheritance. Not only greed, but family training. Not only lies, but boys raised inside lies until they confused dominance with worth. Kofi arrived moments later under escort from another room, saw Jabari speaking and panicked. "You said you wouldn't say anything," he shouted. Jabari turned on him with exhausted fury. "You were already selling me out." Kofi's father grabbed his shoulder. "Enough!" No, Kofi snapped, finally collapsing under his own fear. "I only used the access card because he told me his father would protect us," he said. "Hassan was nothing. He said poor people always lose if rich people stay united." The corridor fell dead silent again. There it was. The naked creed. No euphemism, no etiquette. Just the belief itself spoken plainly. Hassan looked at the two boys and felt neither pleasure nor pity. Only clarity. This was what happened when children were raised in homes where wealth replaced morality and image replaced conscience. By the time consequences arrived, the souls inside them were already half-shaped into weapons. A junior officer approached Hassan quietly. "Sir, you may want to sit." "I'm fine. Your granddaughter's doctor has been calling. We left messages with reception." The world narrowed instantly. Hassan took the phone offered to him and stepped into a quieter office. Dr. Achieng answered at once. "Mr. Hassan." His throat tightened. "Is she worse?" "No," the doctor said, and he nearly sagged with relief. "But the hospital board reviewed her case this morning after media attention connected to the Academy scandal. A charitable cardiac fund has reached out. They want to assess her for emergency assistance." Hassan closed his eyes. For a second he could not speak. Not because pride was wounded, because hope frightened him more than fear now. Fear was familiar. Hope asked more. "Are you saying—" he began. "I'm saying there may finally be a path," Dr. Achieng replied gently. "Nothing is signed yet, but it is real. Real." He pressed a hand over his mouth, breathing once carefully. When he emerged from the office again, the corridor was chaos lawyers, statements, escorts, accusations, but the weight in his chest had changed. Not gone, never that easily, but changed. Nala saw it at once. What happened? He looked at her, and for the first time in many days, something close to light passed through his tired face. "Amara may get her surgery." Nala's eyes widened, then softened in a way he had only seen once before. That she said quietly is what justice is supposed to touch, not just punishment, repair. Across the corridor, Jabari sat on a bench, now shoulders bent. No cameras in his hand, no audience at his back. Kofi was arguing with his father in a low, frantic voice. Mr. Adewale was being led toward a side office with legal counsel and 2 investigators. The principal had stopped shouting entirely. The mighty were not yet finished falling, but they had begun. And as Hassan stood in the center of their unraveling, he understood something with painful precision. The rich children who mocked the poor janitor thought consequences would come like thunder, sudden, cinematic, external. They were wrong. The real blow was this: to watch the lies that built them collapse from the inside. To discover the fathers they worshipped would sacrifice them without hesitation. To learn that the man they called nothing had become the witness standing over everything. Orning would demand more. Fan 10. 3 months later, the academy still stood on the hill, but it no longer looked like a kingdom. The banners had been taken down first. Then the principal's portrait disappeared from the administrative wing. Then the donor plaques were quietly removed from the scholarship hall. Then the board announced a full institutional restructuring, the kind of phrase powerful institutions used when they needed to admit collapse without using the word shame. By then, the country had already chosen its own language. Scandal, fraud, abuse, theft. And beneath all those headlines, another story had traveled even farther than the academy expected: the story of a janitor named Hassan, who had been humiliated in public, framed in private, and still refused to let the truth die. That was the part people remembered, not because Hassan had wanted attention, but because dignity, when it survives deliberate cruelty, makes a sound the world recognizes late. The court proceedings had begun, though such things moved slowly. Mr. Adewale had been formally charged alongside 2 vendor executives and members of the old financial committee. The former principal faced charges tied to fraud evidence, tampering and obstruction. Kofi's father had avoided some of the worst criminal exposure by cooperating early, but his reputation had been torn apart anyway. Investigators were still tracing missing funds across shell accounts and false contracts. And Musa. They found him alive. Weak, hidden, frightened almost beyond speech, but alive in a relative's village across the border where he had fled after being threatened. When officers finally reached him through the evidence trail, he confirmed what Hassan had suspected all along. He had copied records after noticing scholarship funds were being rerouted. He had hidden the ledger and memory card in the maintenance vent when he realized he was being watched. He had intended to come back for them. He never got the chance. When Hassan heard that Musa was alive, he sat in silence for a long time. Relief had come too late to feel clean, but it was relief all the same. In a world where the poor were so often erased, survival itself was a kind of testimony. At the hospital, the greater miracle came more quietly. The Emergency Cardiac Fund approved Amara's surgery after Dr. Achieng and a partner foundation reviewed her case. The same scandal that had exposed the Academy's corruption had drawn national attention to the children whose futures had been traded like bookkeeping errors. Several donors, genuine ones this time, not men buying applause, stepped forward to support not only Amara's operation, but a newly supervised scholarship and medical relief initiative for vulnerable students and staff families. Hassan distrusted generosity that arrived wearing cameras. But this help arrived with paperwork doctors and no demand for gratitude. That made all the difference. On the morning of the surgery, he sat beside Amara's bed and held her hand while she tried very hard to be brave. "Will it hurt?" she asked. A little, he admitted. She considered that with the seriousness children reserved for truths, adults did not soften. "Will I still wake up me?" Hassan's chest tightened. "Yes?" She looked at him through nervous, shining eyes. "Then I can do it." He smiled, though tears had already gathered in the corners of his own. "I know." Hours later, when Dr. Achieng came out still masked and tired but smiling, Hassan had to steady himself against the wall before his knees failed him. "It went well," she said. He bowed his head and covered his face with both hands. Not because he was weak, because some prayers are too heavy to carry back alone when they are finally answered. Amara's recovery was not instant. Healing rarely was. But day by day, color returned to her face. Her breathing deepened. The fear that had lived behind every staircase and every running game began slowly to loosen its grip on both of them. One afternoon, while she sat up drawing birds in a hospital notebook, she looked at Hassan and said, "Grandpa, yes, I think this one knows where it's going now." He took the page from her and studied the bird she had drawn, wings wide, head lifted, no storm around it this time. "Yes," he said softly. "I think it does." At the academy, change arrived less gently. A temporary oversight committee took control. Independent auditors were brought in. Scholarships were reinstated and expanded. Maintenance budgets were published publicly. Staff grievance protections were introduced for the first time. The chapel donation box where Tendai had hidden the originals before the investigation widened, became a quiet legend among the honest staff. No one laughed when they told that story. Tendai received not only full reinstatement, but a national academic commendation after his testimony and school records came under review. His scholarship was upgraded. His mother, when she came to campus for the ceremony, cried openly while standing beside the son who had nearly lost everything by speaking. "You were afraid," Hassan told him afterward. Tendai nodded. "And you spoke anyway." The boy's eyes shone. "Because you were right. Silence only rents safety." Hassan gave a slow, approving nod. "Now remember that when the world offers you comfort in exchange for your conscience, I will." Tendai meant it. Zola returned too, though nothing about her return was easy. There were whispers. judgment, resentment. Some students called her brave, others called her disloyal. A few, the cruelest kind, called her weak for turning against her own circle. She accepted all of it. One morning Hassan found her standing alone in the scholarship office that had once been mostly decorative. Now it was being converted into a real student support center. She held a stack of forms in her arms and looked up as he entered. "I asked to volunteer here after classes," she said. "They said yes." Hassan studied her for a moment. "Do you want praise?" She gave a sad, honest little shake of the head. "No." "Good." Her mouth trembled slightly, then steadied. "I know helping now doesn't erase what I allowed before." "No," Hassan said. "It doesn't." She absorbed that. Then he added, "But repair begins where denial ends." Those words seemed to reach her more deeply than comfort would have. Over the next weeks, Zola worked quietly sorting scholarship applications, helping organize materials for low-income boarding students, reading case files that forced her to confront the human cost of the world she had once floated through, untouched. She did not advertise her guilt. She did not dramatize her shame. She simply began learning how to stand on the side of people she had once helped humiliate. For Hassan, that was enough for now. And Jabari. He disappeared from public view for a while after his statement. Lawyers negotiated. His father's legal team tried to isolate him from direct culpability, then shifted strategy when his testimony became useful. In the end, because he was a minor during part of the scheme and had cooperated late, but substantially he avoided prison. That did not mean he escaped consequence. He lost the school that had once treated him like royalty. He lost the false admiration of friends who vanished the moment status cracked. Most of all, he lost the lie that his father's approval had ever been love. Weeks later, Hassan saw him unexpectedly. Not at the academy. At the community rehabilitation center, where students performing disciplinary service now cleaned public spaces, sorted donated books, and served meals under supervision. Jabari stood in simple clothes with no watch, no entourage, no armor. He looked older somehow, though only months had passed. When he saw Hassan, he froze. Then awkwardly he lowered his gaze. "I didn't come to say sorry because I thought it would fix anything," Jabari said after a long silence. Hassan said nothing. Jabari swallowed. I know now what he made me into, and I know I agreed to become it." That was the first truly adult sentence Hassan had ever heard from him. "Knowing is not enough," Hassan replied. "I know." Another long silence followed. Then Jabari asked, almost as if the question hurt to form, "Do you think someone like me can become different?" Hassan looked at him carefully. He did not owe the boy hope, but he would not lie where truth was still possible. "Yes," he said at last, "if you stop asking whether you deserve change and start earning it." Jabari nodded once. No tears, no dramatic collapse. Just the first visible sign that humility had finally reached a place pride once guarded like a throne. The new school year opened under a different sky. The academy gates were freshly painted, but the grandeur felt quieter now. Less like display, more like correction. Students arrived in pressed uniforms. Parents spoke in lower voices. Staff walked with a little less fear in their shoulders. And Hassan. The Oversight Committee offered him a formal position in compliance and welfare review. The salary was good, the title respectable. The kind of recognition the world gave only after it had first ignored, then exploited, then finally needed a person. He thanked them, and refused. The committee chair stared at him in disbelief. But why Hassan glanced across the entrance hall, where morning light spilled over the marble floor. Because titles did not save this place, he said. People telling the truth did. So he stayed on in a role of his own, choosing part facilities, part mentoring, part quiet guardian of the spaces people once thought too lowly to matter. On the first day of the reopened term, Hassan pushed his cart slowly across the same grand hall where juice had once spilled down his uniform and laughter had once echoed like a verdict. The floor shone. Students passed by. But this time they did not smirk. They did not film. They did not look through him as if labor made a man invisible. They greeted him. "Good morning, Hassan." "Morning, sir." "Sir." That one almost made him smile. Near the staircase, Tendai was helping a new scholarship student find her classroom. In the office corridor, Zola carried program folders for the support center. Outside, the garden staff were laughing with Musa, who had returned quietly to work in a safer post after witness protection measures were arranged. Even the walls seemed less arrogant somehow, as if the building itself had finally been forced to remember whom it existed to serve. Then Hassan saw Amara. She stood just inside the doorway wearing her school visitor badge, one hand holding a sketchbook, the other raised in an eager wave. Her cheeks had color now. Her breath came easily. Dr. Achieng had insisted she keep resting for a while longer before full school placement, but today she had begged to visit. Hassan walked over slower than he felt. "Well," he said, "look at you." Amara grinned. "I wanted to see the place where the bird changed direction." He laughed softly under his breath. Then she looked around the shining hall and asked, "Is it clean now?" Hassan followed her gaze. The marble was spotless. The chandeliers glowed. The air smelled faintly of polish and morning. But he knew she wasn't asking only about the floor. He rested a hand on her shoulder and answered with the fullest truth he had. "It's cleaner than it was," he said. "And the rest depends on what people choose every day." Amara nodded as if that made perfect sense. Maybe it did, because that was the lesson. No scandal, no courtroom, no headline could teach better than life itself. That cruelty can look powerful until truth outlives it. That wealth without conscience is only polished emptiness. That silence protects evil longer than hatred does. And that real justice is not only watching the guilty fall, it is making sure the innocent can finally breathe. Hassan turned back toward the center of the hall, one hand on the cart, Amara beside him, the morning unfolding ahead. The floor beneath them was clean, and for the first time in a very long while, so was the future. Some people believe power belongs to the loudest voice, the richest hand, or the family with the strongest name. But life has a way of exposing what money can hide and what pride can never heal. Hassan's story reminds us that dignity does not come from status. It comes from character. A person may wear a worn uniform, carry invisible pain, and still possess more honor than those standing beneath chandeliers and applause. The truth may be delayed. Justice may suffer. Kind people may be mocked, cornered, or underestimated. But when a human heart refuses to become bitter, refuses to sell its conscience, and refuses to stop protecting the innocent, that kind of strength changes everything. This story also teaches something painful but necessary. Silence has a cost. Every time cruelty is ignored, it grows. Every time truth is delayed, the innocent bleed for it. But the moment even one person chooses courage, one witness, one voice, one act of honesty, the darkness begins to crack. And when courage is joined by compassion, healing becomes possible. Not perfect, not instant, but real. In the end, the greatest victory was not that the guilty were exposed. It was that a child could breathe, broken souls could change, and a man the world looked down on never stopped choosing what was right. What part of Hassan's journey touched you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. If you enjoy powerful emotional stories with deep life lessons, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more.